Calling this meeting to order. Libby Claypool. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. This is really phenomenal. We have a nice full agenda for this evening. Libby and I were talking earlier before the meeting. We do have a couple, if you look at the agenda, there are a couple of housekeeping items that we're going to skip over. One, because we don't have our minutes from last meeting. Two, because the person who is stepping down from the board is not here, so we wanted to formally accept his resignation before accepting Steve's appointment. But just so everyone knows, Kurt Gerald is going to be stepping down off the board. He just has so much going on with the Anchor and Hull. So I had a conversation with him, and I asked if he would feel comfortable with that, which he agreed he would, and spoke with Steve, and Steve said that he would be willing to step up and step into Kurt's shoes. So we're excited about that. Because he's so not busy. No, and Steve is just, as you all know, Steve is so faithful coming to our meetings and supporting CARES and brainstorming ideas and things like that. So that'll be really tremendous to have him on the board. So we're going to skip over the first three items and jump right into activities. So as you know, Guiding Good Choices, today was actually the final day of a 4-part workshop series, and it was extremely well received. We had 20 people signed up, and they always say that you can never count on that number of people who sign up to actually come, but we had about 10 to 12 people come faithfully on a weekly basis. It was held at the library on Tuesday mornings. The third session is actually held in the evening, and it includes the kids. I wasn't able to stay for that, but apparently they do little skits and things like that with the kids, which is really neat. So Linda Nathan, who is a former adjustment counselor from the Scituate Public Schools, is the facilitator of the program, and she did a tremendous job. She's done it quite a few times in Scituate. This is our first time having her here in Hingham. And I've gotten great feedback from people who were there, and I've also gotten feedback from people who wish they could have attended, who would love to see it offered in the evening or on a Saturday morning for working parents. So we're hoping to do that in the spring. It is, however, this is a bit of a segue into where we stand. We're not doing an official treasurer's report, but the program is $800, and we are struggling a little bit financially right now, where we have some really nice donations coming in from some banks and from some private donors. But at this point, there are a few of us who have put up some money for different things along the way that are still owed money. So this is going to be increasing our debt a little bit. We do have some money in the bank to pay for part of it, but the rest of it is going to have to be funded privately. So I've been doing what I can in terms of fundraising. I'm going to have a conversation with Deb Hoffman about doing an actual fundraising event at some point in the future. So if anybody would like to make a charitable contribution, tax-deductible donation to Hingham CARES, you are welcome to do that. I'll take checks this evening. And if you want to hit up your friends, that would be tremendous also. So Guiding Good Choices has been very successful. We're hoping to host a drop-in center over Thanksgiving weekend when we've got kids home from college. And we're talking about doing a social host law and Good Samaritan law forum in early December, which we would love to bring the district attorney, Cruz, back in for, and Chief Olson as well. This was a topic of conversation that came up during Guiding Good Choices, and some of the questions that people posed were very specific. So I believe you're going to be touching on the social host law in your talk tonight, right, Mr. Tim Cruz, District Attorney Cruz, DA Cruz?
If you'd like me to, I would.
Okay, that would be tremendous. Some of the questions that people had pertain to the social host law and what they should be advising their kids to do in various situations. So if you can touch on the legality of the social host law, that would be really terrific. And then we'll schedule something for early December to bring you back. And we don't have any other activities scheduled as of yet, but that's always very much open-ended. Hingham CARES applied for a drug-free communities grant back in July. And it's a federal grant, and the federal government is handing out 150 awards. It's $125,000 for 5 years for each community that's awarded this money. Per year for 5 years. Libby was very instrumental in helping get the grant application put together. It was very complicated. All the moving parts had to be tied together. There were lots of forms that needed to be filled out and submissions that needed to be done. So I don't know if you want to speak to any of that, the process, the financial piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have a lot to say other than it's you know, you do a lot of work to put these things together, and you hope that it's successful. And as Kristen said, we won't really know for a while, but it'll certainly allow CARES to provide a lot more programmatic activity and provide, I guess, just some business infrastructure that right now we kind of lack and that we're using a lot of volunteers for. And Kristen and I have donated a lot of time, but we'd be able to be, you know, more of a kind of a structured nonprofit, because now we are officially a nonprofit, which is wonderful as far as for the donation piece of it. But I think that it would really be a huge shot in the arm for CARES to be able to do some of the things that I know you guys have talked about doing for a while. So fingers crossed, and hopefully within 30 days or so we'll hear.
Yeah, we hope to hear by the end of the month, actually.
Yeah,
I think originally when we filed, we were going to get news in October.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Feed in on that?
yes.
I'd just like to thank both of you for doing that grant, because I know when we originally started in the infancy of the Hingham CARES, that was one of our original goals to do, and we got to the point that all the way to the thought of thinking about the grant, looking at the grant applications, and since that time, probably 3 to 4 years ago, this was always something on the agenda. I'm so glad that we were able to finally accomplish that, because I think Situate's had a program. They have that grant, and they've been running it now for 3 or 4 years. They have an enormous program built up in the town of Situate, and it's really because it's that steady funding and it provides for stuff. It's also helped working it in with the schools as well as infrastructure within the town and the police departments and elsewhere. And Cohasset's doing the same thing. They Christine Murphy, I think, and somebody, I can't remember who the other person was, helped her, but Nicole, it's a ton of work. So I really, it was too daunting for me, to be quite honest with you. So I'm glad that you guys, that you two challenge yourselves to do this. Thank you for doing that.
I spent a lot of time, but Kristen really spent a lot of time, and I can tell you right now, if it wasn't for her initiative and leadership, I don't think we would have. It was a tremendous amount of work. So hopefully our efforts will be fruitful. We'll see. But thanks for all your hard work on that. Really.
Yeah, no, it was good to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an unrestricted grant, or can you use it however you want to, or is it specifically for?
So we had to have a very targeted mission statement, and that targeted mission statement had to be to reduce substance use among the youth in our town. So we've asked people have asked us, well, what about suicide prevention, and what about this, and what about that? And as much as we would love to support those types of programs and bring that into the community, we can't. It falls outside of our purview. So our mission statement had to be very well defined. We also had to be able to find matching funds within the community and from other sources to match the federal grant. So in addition to the $125,000 a year for the next 5 years, we had to account for an additional $125,000 from private donations, from your time coming to meetings, Chief and Officer Ford and Officer Ramsey. I don't recall all the items that we choose, but
too, that's all part of it. Any work that you may do at the schools.
Right.
Karen, it's this combination of a lot of.
So it'll be interesting. So it was the amount of detail, the level of detail that we had to provide was just pretty incredible. And we had to account for expenditures, obviously. So I don't know if they're going to come back and say, okay, you're approved, however, you need to modify your plan. So that will be interesting. I'm not entirely sure how much oversight the federal government is going to have and how much say they will have in how we can spend the money. I think we chose some good programming opportunities. I think we made some good decisions, but they may come back and say, this didn't tie in with this, or this doesn't match this. We also had to choose 3 substances that we were going to 2 substances that we were going to focus on, and we chose alcohol and marijuana because those, as Karen will show us in a few minutes, those are the top 2 issues that we have in the community. But then we also chose to highlight vaping as well, because vaping is definitely very much up and coming and very much causing an issue in the schools. So.
I think also when Steve mentioned the targeting, I know in the other communities and discussing with them over the years, is that we focus in on the target group of the youth, because when you focus in on them, they're the ones moving into adulthood. So there is sort of a crossover period where you can sort of get involved in more than just those target areas. You can get involved into the opioid epidemic, because that's a continuation. If someone has a drug or an alcohol or a marijuana issue, that could turn into different substance abuse. So there is a slight tie over. And my experience with federal grants is they're very helpful. If you have a problem, there's usually someone assigned that you can talk to, and they'll help you through seeing what you can allow for and what not to allow for. So.
Right. Basically anything that falls into the area of prevention is what we're focused on.
And I would just say in the future also, I'm sure, hopefully you get this grant. And when you reapply, if you need help in the future, please reach out to our office, because we have grant writers, and we're able to work successfully with Situate getting their drug-free community grant, and also in the other section of the county, Plymouth, Middleborough, and Carver also have a joint drug-free community grant, which is very similar and very positive. And I think sometimes it's easier, rather than reinventing the wheel, to use the format that's already put out there that has been successful in the past. And so down the road, because they're always changing too, and that's the other thing, is that there's always curveballs thrown at you. And I agree with the chief that it's very daunting dealing with those paperwork. And I do applaud your efforts for that, because I think it's important to continue to do that and to get the monies and the grants that you can get for your specific community. I'm not surprised to hear that alcohol and marijuana are the big issues here.
And I think also it's important, we did work, contact Situate, and they were really good about showing us
They provided us a copy with their
Right.
grant application.
But
which
as
is
you
very
said, the requirements were slightly different and additional requirements, but it was a great place to start,
Yeah.
so.
Any questions about the grants? All right, great. So we will move into a SAD and DARE update with Officer Ramsey and Officer Ford, AKA Cops and Kids.
Seen on HCAM monthly.
Little plug
Harvard Media,
for
my
the
bad.
show.
I mean, sorry. It's still on HCAM. The school year's going well, at least in the middle school. I have half the 6th grade now, while the other half is in art, and I see them once out of the 4-day cycle. So I believe we've had about 7 classes together. So far, we've covered, ways to be in charge, different ways to say no. We talked about dangers of alcohol, and we just are finishing up the dangers of nicotine, tobacco, vaping, smokeless tobacco, and stuff like that. In fact, actually, they have their first quiz coming up in about 2 more classes. So, and then this Friday, I start the health classes with the 7th and 8th grade for a couple of days.
Great.
And for the high school, Maddie Blackwood, our SAD president, could not be here tonight. It's college application time, so this is when seniors kind of go into hiding, and they come back about mid-November. They're all working very hard. She wanted me to speak on her behalf. She gave me a script and said not to mess it up. So so I have it here. But I think SAD as a whole has recognized the issue with vaping right now, both the tobacco, nicotine products, but also the marijuana cartridges as well. And it's really going to be the focus of the year, along with some other things. Last month, they put up a lot of anti-vaping posters, both outside the bathrooms and inside the bathrooms, a common place where kids are going. They just had their fundraiser at homecoming where they sold gelato, and it was about a 50-degree rainy day, so sales weren't that great. So, but they made some money that's going to go towards materials advertising for this message. And then next week they're doing teen driver safety, which it's National Teen Driver Safety Week, so they're going to be putting out statistics and signage for that and different campaigns. And then Maddie's favorite campaign on Friday before Halloween weekend, it's No Booze Weekend, B-O-O, like boo like a ghost. I wasn't going to say it on TV like how she says it, but where they do a campaign where they offer candy to kids to take a pledge not to drink on Halloween weekend, which I guess in the high school community it's a very big weekend for underage drinking, partying. So she tries to have a pledge for kids that weekend not to do it. And then in November, that's really where they're going to tackle e-cigarettes, vaping with their Wipeout Smoking and Vaping campaign. And their slogan for that's going to be, don't let vape dictate your bathroom break, which is a common reason why kids leave to go to the bathroom, is they might engage in those activities. So really striking home the message, and they're going to continue that throughout the year.
Excellent. One of the questions, I may as well pose it to you, Officer Ford and Officer Ramsey. One of the questions that came up with the parents, and most of them have middle school kids who were involved in guiding good choices, was, what should I tell my kids to do if they're at someone's house and kids start drinking and parents either aren't home or are kind of aware that it's going on and are looking the other way? What advice would you give to parents in a situation like that?
I'd have them set up a plan with their child. If something comes up, the child can send the parent a text. The parent can then call the child, send there's an emergency. You need to leave right away. So it's not the kid really saying no, it's the parent is being the, quote, bad guy. And the kid can say, something's come up with my parents, I got to go home. And there are other ways to do it. Actually, we talked about this in class, about getting a password set with your parents. Like when I was growing up, my brother, sister, and I, we had a password of, we forgot to feed the dog. Because back, in the 1980s, the only phone available was one in the kitchen. So I called my parents and said, I forgot to feed the dog. Never had to use it, because all my friends were good kids. But, as I tell the kids in class, I go, guess what I didn't have growing up? A dog. We had a cat. So, the only people who knew that were my friends. And so if my parents ever heard the phrase, forgot to feed the dog, then they'd say, okay, where are you? Come pick you up. Or another one of my buddies, which I thought was genius, had one with his mother, saying that he'd call up, especially if he's sleeping over someone's house, he'd say, oh, but I forgot to tell you, my practice has been moved to, at this time, Central Junior, at this building right here, back growing up, which meant this field right here. And so she would come here, and he'd walk here to pick him up. Or if he's like north side of town, my practice can move to Lynchfield or, South Hingham, to Maryknoll at the time, or someplace like that. And he would just leave the house and just walk to where he had his mom would pick him up. It was genius, so definitely have a plan with the child in case something should happen, whether it's a password or some type of location, or even just a simple text, or even just a letter on the phone. Parent call, take one.
And then with the high school age kids, I instruct, another thing that sometimes happens is if kids know they're home alone, they might take advantage of that to bring alcohol to their home, even if they don't want it to happen. And sometimes peer pressure, they feel pressure to have that in their home. So another time to communicate with the parents, like if you feel that the situation's getting out of control, have communication with maybe a neighbor, a trusted adult, someone that can go over there and break up the party. Because if it gets out of control, they never called for help, and now the police show up. I mean, it's kind of on the kid, their responsibility. So to really, the minute it's getting out of hand or someone shows up with alcohol, report it to an adult, trusted adult right away.
I would just add to this, earlier, last year, we did a show with the Harbor Media and with the kids at the high school, and part of the questioning was the kids were allowed to ask questions, and myself, Tom, and one of the high school counselors, I think it was there. So there is sort of it should be on YouTube with Harbor Media. I'm not sure, I'd have to go look it up, but it was good because kids talked about that. And I think one of the things that we as adults have to be conscious of, and I explained this to the kids, is that if you go to a party to pick up your friend that's intoxicated, you need to have a plan, because what are you going to do with them after you pick them up? You're responsible for that child now. And, you know, we've seen many times where kids have gotten drunk and wandered off from the group, or the group didn't stay with them and watch them over. It's like a buddy system. You come with friends, you watch over your friends, and you all leave together, right? So there's protection. So once you take over that person, it's like you're gonna have to make that decision, because if you drop them off out in front of their house or down the street because they don't want their parents to know, and they walk away and something happens to them, how are you gonna feel? So you need to have those discussions, and you need to have those discussions with your parents, so that everyone, you know actually what to do. Don't wait for it to happen. Have these discussions in advance.
Another question that came up from a couple of parents was, if I show up, so if I have this code set up with my child, and I go to someone's home and I pick up my child, and I recognize that there's activity taking place in the home that's not legal, not appropriate, is it my responsibility to call the police and to let them know that this type of activity is taking place within the home? And if I don't, am I culpable in some way?
Well, we have an attorney here.
I know.
That's more
Social
kind of
host.
to the social host liability
Right.
sort of issues, you know, whereby, you know, first and foremost, here in Massachusetts, the case law has changed recently. It used to be that if you had a party at your house, and if a underage child drank alcohol or got inebriated, I mean, sometimes when I deal with parents and talk to parents, when I go to schools and talk about situations, sometimes I think they think that, you know, if I have a controlled party at my house, nothing's going to happen. The kids will come over. I'll provide alcohol. I'll take their car keys. I'll make sure nothing happens. Well, there's always going to be sorts of conduct that occurs at these parties, whether somebody actually leaves, gets in their car. You know, there's always going to be potential risky sexual behavior that can occur, and who knows where that can extrapolate from. But when you're dealing with, you have a party at your house in Massachusetts now, if you don't provide the alcohol to the minors, then you're fined as pertains to what happens when it leaves your house. Used to be different. Used to be that if the party was at your house and you were there when you knew you should have known about it, then at that point they were going to be in a position that you'd be responsible for it. I guess that's the good news civilly. Criminally, you're going to probably be charged criminally for contributing to delinquency of a minor. You're going to be probably charged with delivering alcohol to a minor, and you're going to have criminal charges against you. And the other thing is, even if you aren't arguably providing the alcohol, I guarantee you that if something terrible happens, you will be sued, because the lawyers sue everybody, and they let your insurance companies all figure it out. So don't provide alcohol to minors is step number one. Making sure that we can provide a safe atmosphere for our kids is incredibly important. Don't provide alcohol or drugs or allow things to occur in your house, because it's also criminal. And we're not going to be in a position that we're not going to not charge you if that does happen. And all too often you hear these terrible cases where people will have parties at their homes and they will provide alcohol, and a boy and a girl will leave, and they'll drive down the road and they'll either kill themselves or kill somebody else. They will be civilly responsible. And there, what that means is that you will be sued, and they're coming after your home, after everything you've acquired during your life. So is it worth it just because you want to try to be your child's friend? That's what we get, unfortunately, when you talk to lots of parents. Everybody, I think, wants to be friends with their kids. And I always say, I want to be friends with my kids too, when they're 25. But until that time, they're going to be, if they live in my house and they're going to high school, they're going to be in a position where they do what the rules of my home says. And I'm not going to provide alcohol and make an unsafe atmosphere for you to go somewhere and put yourself or other kids at risk. I often talk about, you know, sometimes we have kids go to court from these terrible, terrible events that occur. And I remember going to court one day, seeing a young girl who was incredibly inebriated down in the Bridgewater area, down the college area, and she ended up killing a young woman who was walking down the street with two of her friends and seriously hurt them. And I'll never forget going to court and watching that girl, 21 years old, crying her eyes out, knowing that her life in her eyes was over. And she said to the judge, I would trade my life with theirs in a second, and I believed her. I don't think there's anything that she wouldn't have done. But you know what else? She can't. And the only thing that happens in those courtrooms is everybody loses. You have people who have lost their child, they've lost their loved one forever. You have a young kid who's made a terrible mistake, by drinking alcohol or smoking marijuana or whatever the drug may be, getting behind the wheel of a car and changing people's lives in an instant. It happens too quickly. So for the purposes of trying to protect yourself civilly and protect yourself criminally and to protect your kids and the kids that are your kids' friends and trying to make sure that they're safe, do not provide alcohol, do not provide drugs, do not provide an atmosphere like that, because of the fact that there's lots of ramifications. It's a pebble in the pond, and there's going to be a ripple effect from that. So social host liability is serious, and some people choose to look the other way, and they don't think it can happen to them. I've talked to too many people during the course of my career that it can happen, and it does happen, and it changes lives. And that's why I appreciate having the opportunity to talk a little bit here today, because I think it's important for people to hear that from the police officers who go to too many scenes, who see too many things, who see kids and families who are devastated by this stuff. Nobody goes out at night thinking, I'm going to drink too much and kill somebody. Not going to happen to me. It's always somebody else. And I think that, when we do our risk assessment in schools around the county, it's still the number one alcohol problem in Massachusetts, or Plymouth County, is alcohol. And then marijuana. And then, you're dealing with nicotine, and I think kids think nicotine is terrible. Much like they think, vaping is not bad for you. It's a safe alternative. And then marijuana is organic. So we have our work cut out for us with our kids. And I think parents have to be able to say, don't drink, don't drive, don't smoke. You're not getting in my car that I'm insuring and allow that to happen. And it's not going to happen in my house. And I hope that, that we don't have any more of those, but I know, unfortunately, that we will.
Thank you very much. Wise words. Before I forget, I have a whole bunch of pamphlets and flyers and things that I've collected over the past year or so. And I was wondering if there was an opportunity to have, like the, where the bulletin boards are, where different meetings in town, committee and board meetings in town. Is there an opportunity to have some kind of a display where people can pick up pamphlets if they want to, sort of a clearinghouse for pamphlets on the social host law, on marijuana, on vaping? We can talk about it later, but.
That would be probably a good idea. We just have to probably talk to, I would start at the clerk's office and talk to her first. Eileen's pretty good about knowing how everything goes.
Right.
I'm sure there's some room for it. The Board of Health might be interested in working with us. They've always been very helpful when it comes to this program and other things dealing with health issues.
Okay, great. I just thought of it because we were handing out so many pamphlets and things during Guiding Good Choices, and I thought, if somebody were really interested in getting something on the social host law, it's nice to have a little meme that you can post on Facebook, but something a little more substantive, where can they go to pick it up? So the police station seemed like a natural place.
Also, I think on the DA's website, I think we have all sorts of pamphlets regarding a variety of issues, including social host, including a variety of things that are out there now that we produce for free and distribute them in the community.
Okay. So item number 7 is a legislative update from Senator O'Connor's office, and unfortunately they had session today that ran late, so no one is available to provide that. So we're just going to skip over that for now, and we can get an update at another point in time. And even though you just were talking quite a bit on the social host law, you're up next. So if you wouldn't mind taking the podium and standing at the microphone to make it a little more official, I know that you have some other remarks that you'd like to share with us.
Well, thanks so much for having me here tonight, and I know I've pontificated on social host, but I appreciate the work that you're doing and that a lot of our towns and different groups are doing right now, trying to deal with the overall issues of substance abuse that occurs in our respective towns. And I appreciate also the involvement of the police, because I think that's really important. And I think one of the biggest changes that's occurred over the years, having SROs, to me, they're vitally important in the schools. And I think that it's great to have a friendly face to the kids, and they're not scared of police. They appreciate, I think, what the police do, and that the police are trying to help them. And we're dealing with here now the thing that we're dealing with the DA's office now in Plymouth County, trying to deal with the opioid crisis right now. And, you know, you look at the problems that are going on, and we have a task force here in Plymouth County that Sheriff McDowell and myself began it like 4 years back. And from that, Plymouth County Outreach has come out of, and from Outreach is Plymouth County Hope, and all the various things that are going on here in our county regarding the fatal opioid overdoses. And it's really a challenge as I go around and talk at various things, and I talk to district attorneys across the country as to what we're doing here and what our numbers show us. You know, and back in 2018 across the Massachusetts, the fatal opioid overdoses went down 1%, and that's great. And that's because of a lot of people doing a lot of hard work. But in Plymouth County, in that same time period of 1 year, the fatal opioid overdoses went down 26%. And as we stand here right now, since that time period, they've gone down another 10 to 13% in just that short period of time. And so I'm asked as to what is it that the police are doing? What is it that EMS is doing and firefighters are doing? And it's all this real life data and trying to helping people that we can help, having drug courts in all of our courts, making sure we can get people the beds that they need to protect themselves, and also at the same time holding dealers and traffickers accountable for their actions, who are peddling this poison and they're killing people in our community. It doesn't matter what your zip code is. It doesn't matter where you live. There's fatal opioid overdoses. And here in Hingham, over the last 4 years, we've had 4. And that's 4 too many. And so I think that, you know, by working together, we've made some significant progress. And I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to continue to do that and try to drive those numbers until this is just nothing but a bad memory. One other thing I know we've talked about a little bit tonight is the e-cigarettes and the vaping. It is probably one of the biggest problems that is out there. We have basically, you look at these companies that are trying to make money, and nowadays most kids, you know, especially since 2014, kids all look at it as a safe alternative to smoking. And I think we all kind of know now that it's not. And what it is that we have kids who are sucking chemicals. And I remember coming here before and talking when I think it was Tracy Wojciechowski was here talking for DPH, talking about the difference. And I think that when I go around and I talk about, you know, the thing that she did that stuck in my mind was when she sprayed her hair with water and touched her hair with water and nothing happened. And then she sprayed her hair with glycine, which is one of the chemicals that you're sucking into your lungs. And 2 minutes later, your hair was crinkly and crackly. Think of that. Think of that. That's what you're sucking into your lungs. So what I hope is going on right now, Governor Baker has prevented sending a temporary stop on selling those sort of things in the Commonwealth, which is great. I think they're going to do an investigation as to how harmful these products are. I think we should talk to our children about it. And I think we need to continue to make sure that we monitor them in the schools so that they're not in the schools anymore. A couple of years back, before we knew there was nicotine in there, and everybody thought it was harmless steam and water going on. The nicotine, I think, got us in the door to have some better control of those items in the schools. But every school was having problems. Every guidance counselor was having problems. Every principal was having problems because all the kids were doing it. And they were going to the bathrooms and they were smoking when they were, and they're getting in those contests where you can make those crazy designs with the smoke, which I don't know how they do that, but they do that. So I think that where we are, we need to make sure we talk to our kids and try to stay away from the things that are harmful to them so it doesn't hurt them later on. And I think that we need to continue to wait on that. So that's a little bit of an update that I have from the DA's office. Like Kristen said, I have another event, so I'm going to be heading out, but I appreciate coming here tonight, and I really appreciate the work that all of you are doing. I think Hingham is better and safer as a result of the work that you're doing, and I thank you for that. All right. Sure.
So the representative from Senator O'Connor's office, who is going to be here tonight, gave me a quick call, and he mentioned that the judge ruled that the ban on nicotine will end on Monday?
On vaping?
On vaping, but the
Yeah.
marijuana ban will stay in place, is that correct?
You know what, I didn't read the decision, but
Okay.
I do know that it was not a solid decision that came down. I knew it was temporary only, I mean, right now I know that the stores up in Rhode Island and New Hampshire are saying, Massachusetts residents, please come up here and buy your vaping products up here.
Right.
So as to what we're preventing, I appreciate what the governor's thoughts were. I think that's going to be something that's powerful, but I'm not sure what the court ruling was. I haven't read it.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you all
Appreciate it.
very much. All right.
On that vaping
Yes.
issue, it's an interesting thing because I know during the legalization of the marijuana, a lot of this stuff was discussed, and the concept of, well, if we legalize it, there won't be a black market on it. What's happening now is that police departments and agencies are continuing to find large quantities of black market vaping products. And the control that should have been in place is not in place. They're buying stuff, even with the CBD oils. All those are supposed to be controlled through the Mass Department of Agriculture, and I'll guarantee you that if you went looking for the stamp of approval from the Mass Department of Agriculture in the stuff that's being sold everywhere, it isn't, and it's not going through that process. And one of the news agencies actually did a study where they went out somewhere and took 13 different samples of the CBD products, and they contained THC and a lot of other chemicals that they shouldn't have been contained. There's only like 2 of them that were actually met the standards. So this continues to be a problem, and that's why I believe and I'm not sure of the law, but a lot of this is related to the THC cartridges because of this lack of quality control. And it's, like I said, I think we talked about this, that street market is going to stay there no matter what. The only true quality product is the medical marijuana, because it's such a stringent thing, but people aren't going to buy that because it's more expensive. They're just going to pick it up wherever they can get it, and this is the result of what's happening is because of poor quality control, and people are getting sick and dying from it. So.
Well, the medical marijuana also poses the other challenge where if you apply for a medical marijuana card, then your name is entered into a database. You could be flagged for, if you choose to go for a license to carry or something like that. There are concerns that if you are listed in in requiring medical marijuana, if you're listed in a database, that you could potentially not be allowed to have a license to carry. Is there any truth to that?
No, that's not true.
Okay. That's sort of an urban myth.
Yeah, that's one of those urban myths, because we've always dealt with substance abuse when applying for, obviously, if someone's in crisis or they're in a stage where it's unfit to have, then we could suspend the license, but it doesn't mean it's a guaranteed. People have the right to get better. These are medical issues. Someone taking medication, we're not going to, you know what I mean? So you have to look at it as a whole. And we don't share the medical database. That's not something that we look at because it's prescription controlled. So that would be another false rumor.
It might be regulated under HIPAA, and therefore it wouldn't be,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good
No.
point.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chief. All right, without further ado, we have Karen Beatty. Yes, I can hand those out. Health teacher from Hingham High School. Is going to be presenting the most recent data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Oh, you have them? Whoops, thank you.
So there's 2 handouts. One is just a copy of the slides, so you have that close up, and then a piece that I'll share with you at the end that we're hoping to get some more information on some programming. So my name is Karen Beatty. I'm the health teacher at the high school. This is my 18th year in the district, and one of my roles is as the health resource teacher, which means I oversee K-12 health program, and I also collect data as part of that process. So we use the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. A quick background on that. That is a survey that was developed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and so we use that survey. We modify it slightly. We've taken some questions off that over the years that don't really pertain to our community, and we've added a few on that we've wanted to get information on, but essentially it's the same survey as the national survey, and also the state of Massachusetts also collects its own YRBS data. So we survey the 7th grade, 9th grade, and 11th grade students every year. And so here are just some key data points, I think, that relate to substance use in our community, in our school. So the first one is on tobacco and vaping. I just thought, as seems to be the pressing issue right now, all over the news that's going on. And so this is our data from this year comparing tobacco use, having ever tried tobacco versus ever having vaped, and then vaped in the last 30 days, or what we call recent use in the last 30 days. And so you can see that, we see this with all risk behavior, is that those numbers go up with age. So obviously they're going to go up from grade 7 to 9 to 11. That's kind of a natural thing. But you can see the difference in the vaping numbers in how much higher they are than using tobacco. So where it used to be our concern about using tobacco, and we had gotten those numbers way down through a lot of reasons, now our vaping numbers are pretty high. So, in the 11th grade, we have over 60% of the students saying that they had at least tried vaping at least once, and then over 40% of the 11th graders saying that they had vaped in the last 30 days. So when we look at recent use, anytime we say used in the last 30 days, that's a more of an indicator of someone who is a habitual user. So that's why we like to look at those numbers and compare them to the question when we say, have you ever done something? We like to look at both. So it's a concern that there's still such a high number of students saying that they have used recently with vaping. So we know it's a problem. We knew, it's on the news, but certainly the numbers are there to prove that. And then obviously we wanted to look at what has happened with vaping in the last few years. Has it gone up? And it has. Certainly more students have tried it, and the numbers are definitely up there, over 30% in the last 2 years having recently vaped. And again, that's a concern that they are habitual, becoming habitual users, or more at risk to becoming more of a habitual user. Okay. So one of the things I thought that would be interesting to ask is, where are they getting it? So we asked the question, where, if you have vaped in the last 30 days, where are you getting those either e-cigarettes or your vaping device? And so some of the kids are getting them because they're giving money to somebody to buy them for them. That 14% that are saying, I got them in some other way, I think is something we need to explore. I want to do a little ground surveillance with my students and kind of say, like, give me I did ask a few seniors today, saying, like, what's going on? Where do you get this stuff? Found out that it's apparently very difficult to get things off the internet. And that, frankly, would have been my guess, like that they have credit cards, a lot of kids, and they can order all kinds of things on the internet. But apparently it's very difficult to get any kind of vaping device on the internet for them. Which is reflected in the number of only 1%. I'm like, okay, well, that's good. But I think we still need to delve into where, if we can limit access, then obviously that could help too. So we'll see this issue of giving somebody money to get it for them again. We look at other substances. And then, of course, we have to look at alcohol, because that is the dominant issue. It has been, like I said, I've been here for a long time. So when we look at, having ever had alcohol and versus recent drinking, again, that's had a drink in the last 30 days, and then binge drinking, and that's defined at the bottom. Binge drinking is defined as 5 or more drinks in a row or within a short period of time. That our numbers, especially with the higher grade level, are really high. Those are high. Recent drinking in the last 30 days, that we have almost 60% of our 11th graders saying that they've done that. And the number of kids who's, 11th graders saying that they have binge drank is 42% is pretty high. And we compare that to the Massachusetts data, our numbers are higher than with the survey of the whole state. And so it's clearly an issue in the community that we need to, that we know of. We know this, but we need to keep looking at it. And kind of circling back to what the DA was discussing, we're talking about access to alcohol and parties in town, and basically environments where they're allowed to drink. And so these numbers concern me a lot, is that that kids are not only going to parties, so the blue is unsupervised, basically being at a party where alcohol is present, where there's no parents. That's unsupervised. Versus parents present, but they may not know drinking's going on. So maybe the kids are in a certain part of the house, there's some alcohol that's been brought in, parents may not know it. And being at a party with parents present where they know that drinking is going on, and that number is actually higher than parties where the parents don't even know there's drinking. So when we look at grade 11, basically 50%, it's 49% of 11th graders say that they've been to parties in the last 3 months where alcohol was being consumed and parents were there and they knew it. Is really concerning. So it sends a message to kids that it's okay, or again, that misconception that it's safer to drink in the house under their watchful eye, and that's really a concern. So clearly that there's an environment where kids are allowed to drink, and it's something I think that we need to continue to look at. I also ask a question about access to alcohol, where they get it. Again, where are you getting it? Where are you getting your hands on alcohol? And 18% say they gave somebody else money to buy it. So most of the time, I think in those cases, it's an older friend, or it could be an older sibling. And so that's another way of looking. Like if there are high school kids and they've got siblings in college, kind of paying attention to what's going on with them. And are those older kids helping the younger ones get access to substances, whether it's alcohol or vaping. Somebody gave it to me, so maybe they went to a house party and it was already there because somebody else brought it, kind of thing. And if a small percentage are taking it from home, so it always goes back to be aware of what's in your house and lock up your alcohol and keep tabs on that too, just in case. And then marijuana. So again, we're looking at, have you ever used, and have you used in the last 30 days? And so again, with grade 11, we've got it's almost 60% that have tried marijuana at least once, and 43% have used in the last 30 days. And then I thought, well, with the changes in the law, we've talked about this in our class, are we seeing shifts in what kids are using? I think when the laws changed around marijuana, there was concern that it would be looked at as, again, permission to say, well, it's safe, it's legal. So, are we going to see an increase? So we are seeing a slight increase. We look at the alcohol numbers in trends since 2006. We're seeing a little bit of a decrease in alcohol, which is great and promising, and just that slight sort of rise. So we're going to continue to look at that and see if marijuana use continues to go up. That's recent marijuana use, again, used in the last 30 days, will continue to go up. So for the first time after 2018, we start to see them sort of, marijuana numbers surpass some of the binge drinking numbers. And I thought this was a really interesting thing to look at, is we do ask the question about have they driven a car after using substances? And I thought it's, there's 7% say they did that after drinking alcohol. This is just 11th grade, because obviously the 9th graders don't have their license, so I don't have that up there. But 21% of 11th graders say that they've driven after using marijuana. So again, I think it's that perception that maybe, and I could be wrong, but are they looking at it as, well, it's not that bad, it's legal, it's safe, so they're more willing to risk driving under the influence of that, or having recently having used it, than alcohol, which is, they've had their lifetime of getting that message that they should never drink and drive, but it seems like that number is going to be interesting to continue to look at too, as we have seen the laws around marijuana sort of relax. Sure.
If I remember correctly, when I was looking at these numbers, when I was writing the grant, the numbers are very similar with kids who have gotten in the car with someone who has consumed alcohol versus someone who's, meaning the driver has consumed alcohol, versus a driver who's used marijuana. So there definitely is a perception that somehow marijuana is the safer alternative.
Yeah, or that you're not as impaired, or it's not dangerous, or they can, I can drive. It really concerns me that they that they've done that. Okay. I did put up just one thing about opioids because it's a concern. And so we added these questions a number of years ago as we started seeing this become a problem with I wanted to know how exposed kids are to opioids, because people will get prescriptions for these for legitimate reasons. And so 25% of the 9th and 11th graders have been prescribed it for a medical reason. Very often in high school kids, it's for surgery, some type of surgery, and oftentimes can be related to a sports injury or having their wisdom teeth removed. So, kids are exposed to opioids, but then, almost 10%, 9% of the kids say that they've taken a prescription opioid differently than how the doctor told them to use it, or basically, not under a prescription at the time. So, it's important for us to, even though the DA said, numbers are going down, it looks like overdose deaths are going down, it seems like we're finally chipping away at that problem of opioids, that our kids are exposed to them, and they need to be watched. That little bit of exposure is a risk, so we want to keep an eye on that. So what are we doing? At least from the school standpoint, for the most part, we do have our safety officer at the elementary level, and we have some lessons that we've made available to the elementary schools, but we actually don't have a dedicated health teacher at the elementary level, and so those lessons are implemented by teachers and other staff when they can, which means it's inconsistent probably, and our safety officer has a lot of other things that he's teaching as well, so that's not really his priority. We have the DARE program with Officer Ramsey for a long time. We've had the DARE program in the 6th grade, which is fabulous, and as you said, you do the booster lessons with the in the middle school health classes, and we have a dedicated health class. 7th and 8th graders take health for a term each year, and so we do address, but we have a lot of other things to address in that time, not just substance use, so we get some in there. At the high school level, we have one semester-long course in the entirety of high school that happens at sophomore year, so we can spend more time on it. Officer Ford comes in and does some great lessons too. Lori McCarthy has been bringing speakers from Hair and Wellness into the classes the last few years that have been phenomenal. Those are folks that are going through treatment, and they come in and they tell their story. They're young addicts that will come in and share their story. It's really eye-opening. So we do as much as we can. We've got the SAD program again that Officer Ford is an advisor for, and they've got such great leadership students this year in the last few years. So they do great work, and now we have the HCAM segments that we'll see some more over the coming months. I think that can address some of these issues too. So that's what we're doing at the school level. Again, I think from the community level or community aspect, we could really use some support. There's only so much we can do. We only have so much time. One of the things, the other handout that I gave is I'm going to a meeting next week because the Caron treatment facility, they've got some new programs that we might be able to take advantage of. So they already have this Project Connect nicotine cessation program, but it's run by a facilitator in the school. So somebody can get trained to do that, but oftentimes the implementation of those are difficult because where do we pull kids out of? Do we pull them out of a class? Are they available after school, before school? And so they are going to be sharing next week information on this new platform called Connect 5. It's a digital platform, and it could be a way for kids to go through some coursework, but they can do it at a time that's convenient for them. They would use their device, they could do it before school, after school, at their own pace. They get a certificate when they're done. And there's other programming apparently on this platform. So next week I'll be at a meeting and find out more about that, and I'll give you an update as soon as I find out. It should be, could be very exciting, and a really great way for us to get information out in the little time that we have. And I just want to point out that all of this data, there's a lot of data. So I just pulled out a few points on it, is on my website. So we have a health department website, and that's at hinghamhealth.weebly.com. And that you can find the link to that right off the high school website. If you go to either academics and health or under my name, Beatty, you'll find that. And so you can see there's all the reports are there. And also on my website, I have another tab that's links and resources about all kinds of health topics. But I have obviously plenty of things that deal with substance use and trying to get help, and where to find treatment programs and things like that. So if anybody's ever looking for that, among lots of other health topics, if you scroll down the page, there's a lot there, then certainly visit that.
What is that website? I can't.
That's my site. So that is my health department website, which is, again, if you go to the high school website and you either go to academics and you go down to health, it's the health department, health curriculum department, or if you go to Beatty under teachers and you go to my name, in the direct address is hinghamhealth.weebly.com. You can type that right in and it'll bring you to my site, and then you can see along the top there are tabs, so you can look at and all the curriculum that we do K to 12, and then there's data in surveys, so that's this page, and then health websites and resources, a place to contact me, and the last time we did a curriculum review presentation, the whole thing's on there too. But okay, so that's our website. So thank you.
That was tremendous. Really,
There's
thank
a lot
you
of
so
data.
much.
You know, it's difficult because
You're not sitting down yet. I have some questions.
I'm still. I'll see if I can answer. But there's, you know, when you're asking about the, or mentioning that other data point about kids who have ridden in a car with somebody, like I've got all of that, and that can all be found on the website too. But so I'll have to do my best. I don't know if I know all the numbers.
First of all, how would you like me to address you?
Karen.
What can I say? In school, do they pronounce, or do they?
Beatty. You
Beatty.
mean?
Miss Beatty?
Yes.
Okay.
I say Beatty, I apologize.
It's okay. Everybody. It's yeah.
Well, I want to address you the way the students would be addressing you because we're on TV, so I didn't.
Miss Beatty.
Miss Beatty, okay. When you were doing some of those figures and you combined the numbers and came up with the single, did you just take an average of the 9th and the 11th?
Yes.
Okay.
So
So there actually might be higher in reality if you just did the 11th grade than what they showed.
in certain things, right? So
Yeah.
I have the data split in every which way. So we have it as grade 9 and 11 together, and then we can pull it apart and look at we can look at 7 separately as well, grade 9 and grade 11, to see those differences as the grades go on. I can also actually get you the numbers by gender. So sometimes we'll look at certain data points on anything, whether male versus female, is there a difference? Which, frankly, in substance use, typically males are higher. The numbers are higher.
I think one of the questions that, first of all, those numbers totally shocked me. They're outrageously high. Makes me wonder, like, I'm almost feeling like the police department's letting you down by not stronger enforcing some of these things. But one of the questions that I know, and this has always come out, are they still asking the question if who the kids consider good role models? Because I think in the past there was a question on one of these surveys.
There's a question that I have the report in my file of that says something about, do you have a trusted adult?
Yes, and I think it asks about their parents.
I think
included in the
there's 2
question.
questions. If I remember, there's 100 questions in the survey,
Yeah.
so
No,
forgive me
no.
that I don't know them off the top of my head, but or 99 questions. I think there's 2 questions. I think there's one that is worded, do you have a trusted adult to speak to in school, and then a trusted adult outside of school.
Yeah.
So I think that it's asked both ways, so we can see, like, do they have somebody, and I can find that.
Well, I know in the past we've looked at this number, and it really scares me, the fact that these children are not really perceiving their parents as good role models. And
Yeah,
I see this has been a problem, and it's something that I don't understand why parents do some of the things that they do, because the actions of a parent, kids learn from their parents, and I think over the years, I've talked about this, and at sporting events at the high school, I have to put signs up that we're not allowing tailgating
Right.
at events, and I have to put up signs that say there's no alcohol allowed, that no people can't bring solo cups into the thing because they're bringing drinks and alcohol into kids' sporting events. And there's been places where I've gone in uniform that parents have put on events for children because they're concerned about children drinking, and they don't have anywhere to go. And I walk into the back room, and there's people drinking wine. And I'm there like, okay, what are you doing? You shouldn't be doing this. And I think part of the mission that we have, and this is what I'm saying is part of this organization, we need to educate parents.
Right.
It's not just the children, we've got to, I mean,
Yes.
I think one of the projects that was interesting is that there was always talk about having kids go out and collect all the nip bottles all around the town. And tracking where they're found, because you'll find that they're in certain places all the
Right,
time, and so
right.
why are those nips there? I mean, and it's just funny how we as this group really need to address that problem. If you want kids to get better, because it seems apparent from the figures here, and I think just our own general knowledge, that kids are going to parties and parents are fully aware that this is going on. We had 2 cases this year, and they all went to court. And I'm not, there's no deals on those things. I told the district attorney's office, and I've told the parents, it's like, it will go through the regular court. We're not it's not gonna get bargained out. It's gonna go to a judge and they'll make the decision. We just need to be so careful of this, and, it goes back to the question that you asked earlier. Well, if I'm a parent and I know that someone's having a party, what should I do? I was always told, when you have to ask that question, you already know what you're supposed to do.
Right.
You know that you should be calling somebody. You owe it to those parents to call somebody and tell them, like, hey, if you're not home, this is going on at your house.
These are, just to give a caveat, these are parents who have middle school kids, so they're not quite there yet.
No, I know, but I'm not trying to, but I sort of get passionate about this because, we've got to start making these tough decisions as parents. We all have to do that. We have to be parents. We are responsible for what our kids do, and, we need to, I know that kids are using Ubers to go to parties. I mean, this is stuff that, you have to engage your children and talk to them about these things. You don't have to be, but you do owe that to them. You owe it to yourself, I think. But
We talk about that in class. So Officer Ford comes and does a lesson in our 10th. So we see every 10th grader, and we do a lesson. He does a lesson about a lot of legal issues that these kids need to be aware of, all their, as they're getting older, and we talk about that.
Yeah,
He talks
yeah.
about, the social host law and what that means, and why, our parents shouldn't be allowing the kids to do that. It's not safe. It doesn't, just because they don't get behind the wheel of a car, doesn't mean that nothing's going to happen
But
to them. So
the
it
parents
concerns me too.
The parents give the false impression that
Right.
the kids feel it's okay because the parents are allowed in the home.
Right.
And that's where these bad habits start, because they never have this feeling it's forbidden, that's actually accepted in their culture. So
I think there's also the myth of, well, they're all going to do it. Every kid is going to drink, so I might as well let them do it under my roof where I can keep an eye on them. And that's not true. Not every kid is going to drink. And, but when we do that, you're giving them a red carpet to drink. So, we have to stop with just assuming all the kids are going to do that, because they don't. They don't all want to do that.
Guiding Good Choices has been really tremendous in starting those kinds of conversations. And I haven't stayed for all of the workshops because I don't want people feeling uncomfortable having somebody be there as a sort of a fly on the wall. But I've talked with the instructor afterward, and she said that the conversations that these women engage in and the level of honesty, the sharing that they do during the course of these conversations has been really tremendous. So I think if we can continue to bring that program back to the community, it's going to be very well received. I think it's something that people will consistently be looking for. And from there, speaking of referring to the ripple effect that the DA had mentioned before, this is a positive ripple effect. You start with a small group of people. There were only 10 people in this workshop series, but they have conversations with their friends. They have conversations with their kids. Their kids have conversations with their friends. So that's the positive ripple effect that we want to see happening. We want people to have these challenging conversations with their children and with their peers, quite frankly. You know, if you're an adult and you see a friend or the parent of another child doing something that you know is harmful, and you should feel empowered to speak up and say something.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty.
Anybody with any other questions for Ms. Beatty while she's up there?
I can answer them.
I had a feeling Lynn might have one, that's why.
No, you might have already mentioned it, but, like, what, do you always do the surveys, like, at the same time of the school year?
Yes. Okay, I should have given you a little more background. Yeah, so in the high school, we always do it in March. We pair it up with an MCAS day because the day's already messed up.
Yep.
The middle school is a little bit softer because they have a lot of other scheduling obstacles in the spring too. So sometimes they're a little later. They might be closer to May. But the high school, we always do it at the end of March. So at least the timing,
Okay.
you know, so you're trying to compare at the
Right.
same time. Because it does matter. In the high school,
Right.
6 months can matter.
Absolutely.
I will say that if you do go on and look at the all the data reports that are on my site, the year before, in 18, we did a big data collection activity under the Hingham Tiered System of Support project. And so we folded the questions into that because we didn't want to over survey kids. But that survey that year was done in the fall. So those data numbers, you know, are about 4 months earlier than what we normally do. But in general, yes, it's always March for the high school and the whole grade. So it's not just a segment of the 9th grade, or it's the whole grade.
What is your sense of how honest kids are in answering these questions?
So I always get that question. Every time I present this data, I get people that will say, but my kids say that everyone lies on it. So here's the shortest response I can give to that. When you do data collection, there's a number of things you do to get the best data you can. And we do a lot of those things. So we use a valid instrument, which is the CDC survey. It's not just something we wrote up. It's been validated and it's been used for 25 years. We survey the kids anonymously, so there's no names on it. That helps tremendously. So there's no way to identify the kids. We use a large data set, so we're not surveying 30 kids out of the 11th grade. We're surveying 300 kids from each grade. So it's a big number. They all do it at the same time, so it's not like Miss Adams' class gets surveyed on A block and Mr. Brown's class gets B block, and so they can talk about it in the hallway. They all get it at the exact same time, so they can't discuss it and skew results along the course of the day. So those are pretty good data collection hallmarks. The other thing is we can then compare the data to the state and the national data, and the numbers all line up. We can also use other data, from school discipline data to the police data to community data, to also kind of confirm and back it up. And I also say, like, if they were lying, then it's a vast conspiracy of lying of all the teenagers in the state and the country, because the numbers magically sort of line up. I mean, as we looked at, our numbers for alcohol were higher than Massachusetts, but
Right.
but they are there. And the other thing, if you look at some of the things that we know aren't an issue, say there's a question about, have you ever used heroin? And if you look at our numbers, it's like 2%. Well, if they're all lying, why isn't it 60%? Like, if they're all being jokesters and lying, why is that only 2%, yet the alcohol is 49%? Like, they're only lying on some of the questions. And then usually, when it's a parent that says this, and I understand why they're saying it, because they're upset when they see those numbers, like you said. They think that can't be possible. And so I say to them, when your child said to you, oh, everybody lies about that, what did you then say? You were probably like, whew, okay, let's have dinner, right? It got you to stop asking about it. And that's why they say that. So yes, there's always going to be a small segment of people who might be lying about it. And it's just like any other survey or poll. We watch, political polls, and it'll say plus or minus margin of error. It's the same. So let's say it's 2 or 3% margin of error. But in general, those are the numbers. Like, we're pretty confident that they're not that far off. So we'll always look at a margin of error, but there's a lot of ways that we do this that give us confidence in the numbers. And when kids say that, it tends to get the conversation dropped, and that's what they want. So.
Well, you've clearly been asked that question quite a few
Every
times
single
because you
time.
got a very
I
thorough
and I'm
answer.
always glad that somebody does, because the kids, so I share some of this data with the kids, different data points at different units that I do, and the kids will say it too to me, and then I give them that same speech and just say, like, yes, there's a couple goofballs in the room that are probably the ones that lied, but when you're surveying 650 kids or 800 kids, if a dozen kids are goofballs and liars, then that's still going to keep us in a good place. So
My experience
I'd rather
with polls, just internally over 39 years with people that we're booking and arresting, is that they'll give you, they're very pertinent about the information regarding drugs and all that kind of stuff and alcohol, but one of the only questions they never really tell you is where they got it. And that's why I was a little bit alarmed about the internet, because I know that it's not uncommon for the police department to get calls about packages being delivered to other people's houses that, geez, we didn't order this stuff, and it's somebody else's name. A lot of these, because if you have a lot of these people that will buy things and have it shipped to somebody else's house with a different name, they know when it's coming because you get a text. Package is dropped off. You run over to the house and you pick it up before anybody else gets it. So this is a common thing with the internet now, and so they're not even, they're getting to it before the parents will ever see it, or they're delivering it to somebody else's house that they know is they're at work every day till 6 o'clock. So this stuff has come, there is a way to get this stuff, and I don't think I'm sticking my neck out saying that.
That's different than actually buying it from an internet website.
No, they're buying it from the internet website because where's the verification?
Well, you could send it to Officer Ramsey via FedEx. Now, remember
Yeah,
that?
it could be sent, yes, yep,
Yeah,
yep,
same on
yeah,
Skype.
yeah,
You could ship stuff all over the place.
yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, they'll find the way to get it, they are getting
Yeah.
it, so.
I
They're
honestly,
just not
my
gonna
bigger
probably tell
concern
you.
on the internet
Yeah.
is their older siblings.
Yeah,
So when kids are coming home from college, what are they up to? Like, I know you guys see a huge uptick in house parties over Thanksgiving break and over when the college kids are home, and just be aware that, if you've got a younger child and an older child, make sure that older child understands that they shouldn't be supplying alcohol or anything to the younger kids. It's also against the law. Even if they're 22 years old, it's against the law for them to
Yeah.
do that. And so
but I think we had to remind the
that's what I
kids
worry about.
at the high school that no other parent has the right
Mm-hmm.
to tell your child or them that it's okay for them to drink.
Right.
You can't go and if you go to a house and say, well, Mr. Smith said it was okay, that Mr. Smith has no power to give you that authority. He can't do it. And they need to know that. Just that they're gonna tell you that, but,
I keep coming back to the fact that the brain is not fully developed until the age of 25, so they're not making rational, reasonable choices and decisions, and they rely upon adults to help guide them through that whole decision-making process.
Right. So again, the parents who say, like, well, they're going to drink anyway, or it's safer in my house, their brains are not able to handle that. So they're putting their children at a much higher risk of becoming addicts, because the younger somebody drinks, the higher the risk is. And so do they really want to do that? You're welcome.
Extra hours to your, I think, was it last year or 2 years ago, they added in more hours to your.
They did, right. So we had, at the high school level, we only had the students in class for 6 weeks. Freshman year and sophomore year, we've now combined it into a full semester. So that gave us an additional 6 weeks with the kids. It's just happening all in one grade level now. So that's been tremendous. But again, that's all they get in high school. So, we would love to have even more. We would have more time would be great.
How would a
So,
parent go about advocating for that?
School committee meetings and, budget season, when we kind of proposed that. We would need more staff to do that. And so we propose staff, but it has to get approved, at a budgetary level. So we'll keep asking. So
Yeah.
anybody wants to get on our bandwagon.
Well, I think it's important because one of the, with the chiefs of police, we often go to meetings, and at least once or twice a year, we have legislators come in and they present what's going on. And every single time you go, they say, like, well, we need to hear from you. We actually listen to the people that make phone calls and write letters, and I always just said to them, well, I don't want to bother you. And I yell at people when they say that to me. So I have now taken to actually sending emails to the legislators when something's coming up involving police. And I don't feel bad about doing that, because I think that's how they make their decisions. But they listen to everybody, and it's the same with the school committee and the schools. If people feel something, they need to advocate for it.
Yeah.
And be involved in groups like this to help
Right.
us sort of get some of this stuff going, So I would urge people out there to get involved in Hingham CARES and help support this. I think it's been a great cause, and we'll continue to champion the causes.
And if we are awarded this grant money, one of the first things that we'll do is hire an administrative assistant who can manage all of the details, all of the ins and outs and the workings of Hingham CARES. That will be tremendous in and of itself. Did you have something to say? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say that there isn't any current programs in the primary level right now.
Right.
And really, even though they're little, it's building that foundation of making healthy choices and, assertiveness and just making good decisions. And that starts at the primary schools, and we're really not doing a lot, or there could be more that could be done.
I remember Dr. Gallo talking about part of the curriculum includes not substances per se, but with the little kids, it's, saying no, learning to say no, not putting something in your mouth if you don't know where it came from, that sort of thing. So it's like an introduction to the whole conversation about substances.
But
Is that?
sometimes it might not even be talking about substances, it's just teaching them how to make healthy choices about their body and taking care of themselves, personal
Right.
hygiene, washing their hands, and how not doing those things affects people around them, their community, their friends, their family. It's just like foundational skills that you.
I think about a year ago, or maybe a little bit longer, time goes by quickly, but you had sponsored an event at the New North Church, and there was a nice young gentleman that came to speak about his addiction issues. And I know the superintendent was there, and I was a little bit shocked when Superintendent Gallo said something about teaching yoga classes to the students. And I was the person that was speaking there. I looked over at him, and he said, I wish they had offered that where I went to school, because it would have helped me make better decisions. So it was interesting that one of the things we don't quite see, and it might be interesting to have a school lay this out, but Dr. Gallo did a really great job of explaining all the different programs that the kids go through that most of us really aren't aware, and it starts out at a younger age and progresses through the different stages. You have a hand up.
Insight. There are some things that are being done at the elementary level. They're not substance abuse lessons. Historically there was lessons that were put together for every single grade. They're inconsistently implemented at this point. Again, the issue is there's not a dedicated teacher, and so you're asking classroom teachers to add more and more and more, and so it gets really difficult for them to juggle adding those specific lessons. But more recently, there is some of the elementary schools have gotten training in a yoga type of program where they can use that with the kids to kind of help them with their emotions. And then we've just done this major project in the last 2 years, the Hingham Tiered Systems of Support. And one of the outcomes of that was the implementation of a new program called Toolbox. Every grade, pre-K to 6 now. And that is aimed, it's not a substance abuse thing, but it's aimed at having kids controlling their emotions, learning how to deal with those things, because that is the foundation of not needing to use substances, is being able to control their feelings and express their feelings and all that. So that program has been wildly received by the teachers. They love it. It's already making differences in those schools. So I think we'll see that, it's only in its first full year now. I think that might be something really, really positive moving forward. So there are some things happening in
To
the
see it all laid
elementary
out
level.
when she told me, because,
Yeah.
it was shocking to me. And
Counselors do some stuff,
Yeah.
and there is a scope and sequence
they
of
have a bigger picture.
pieces
yeah.
of stuff. Yeah, there is some stuff.
Like the social emotional learning
Right.
Yeah.
teams.
But there's a responsive classroom. There's
Sure.
a number of things that fall under our umbrella of health that can directly or indirectly impact all kinds of outcomes. So
Yeah.
we are doing some things at the elementary level.
I was actually at a 2-day class that was given, and as police officers, we were actually addressing the issue of well-being and your mindset, and how officers need to keep a more positive thing. And they talked about, breathing exercises, and to get out of that negative thing that we all fall into. And by controlling your mind and your emotions, you can stay more positive, which relates to a better outcome out on the street. So I think that's what it's becoming more and more popular as we learn more how to be more positive. It's not, so it's affected the kids, it's affecting us, the mental health issues, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're definitely doing more of that too.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Ms. Beatty.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so the only thing that I have for additional business is setting up a meeting once the grant has been either approved or denied, and we're hoping that it's going to be approved. We're assuming at this point that no news is good news. And we would like to set that up by year end. So I will send an email around to board members and make sure that we can get a good showing for a board meeting, so that we can deal with some of the housekeeping items, take some votes that we need to take, and move forward with the grant.
Yeah, because I think we just want to make sure we get that a meeting, because it is a December 31st year end for the nonprofit now, so we would like to try to get that. It's
Yes.
important to do by year end. Yep.
Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to add? Nope. Excellent. Good. Well,
So much.
we're adjourning at 8:03.